Alright, so it seems like we're around that time of year again where we need to have another conversation about representation in media. And I feel like it's hard to have a conversation about representation now because big corporations have turned this into just another buzzword like diversity to sell us all a product. And so you can probably guess I've seen Captain Marvel this week and I have lots of thoughts on it, but thankfully, there are some really cool ladies solely discussing this movie, its faux progressivism, and its exclusive feminism. I will link them all in the description if you want to give them a read yourself, because they're very good and way more articulate than I could ever hope to be about it. What I want to have is another discourse about why representation matters and how I feel people have structured their reviews and discourse surrounding movies recently. I think people have begun to lump together representation and novelty. Two terms that essentially have nothing to do with one another, yet have been used in correlation with one another that so much that it only feels fitting to add my voice to the crowds of others who have said this by now. So first off, let's define novelty. Novelty is very simply the act of just doing something new. We like things to be novel because they're things we've never experienced before. They're an original idea. It's a very base love and raw reaction to something. It's the opposite of when you hear someone say something is tropey, trite, or red, which are all things that have been done before. So, very simply, novelty is originality. It's special, but it's pretty basic. Representation, on the other hand, is a movement to get different people of various cultural backgrounds and identities producing and creating media that is consumed by the masses. It was a reaction to years of yellow, brown, and blackface casting, bigoted depictions and storylines of multicultural characters, and just allowing different groups of people to tell the stories about their life. Whether it be gender, race, class, sexuality, religion, or anything else, representation is a movement to get all these varying identities on screen, on text, on stage, or just on a platform. But unfortunately, it seems like most headlines today focus representation on the novelty of just having one of those aforementioned identities, like how Black Panther has an all-black cast, Crazy Rich Asians has an all-Asian cast, Ocean's 13 has nearly an entirely women cast. And look, this is not bad. As I mentioned before, novelty is not entirely or inherently bad, but within all this camouflaged marketing, there has been a reductive definition of what representation truly is. And it's just that representation, or it seems to be what marketing would like you to think, is that representation is all about the novelty of having some kind of exotic group of people on display, which then leads to a bunch of crappy people being crappy about the source of media in these, in this way, in subtle and sometimes very obvious ways. For a very personal example, I've discussed before what representation means to me with the character of Miles Morales, both his comic book iteration and the adaptation of him in the new Spider-Man for PS4. It might feel a bit dated in comparison, and honestly I don't even know what my hair is doing in that, but I'd recommend going and checking that out if you want to hear about representation, how it applies to me, and just as an individual. And this leads me to talking about Captain Marvel. First off, I like Captain Marvel. It is not a perfect movie, neither through film technique or even in the larger themes it is attempting to tackle, but I can safely say as someone who has seen every Marvel movie, this isn't no Iron Man 2, no Thor the Dark World. It is what we come to know as a solid Marvel film, but it has the novelty of having the first sole lead woman. And that novelty is a good thing, because honestly, how many things do we all enjoy because they're novel? Like, I think Avatar: The Last Airbender is a pretty solid show, but what really pushed it over the edge was the usage of Eastern philosophy and mythology. For a lot of kids, myself included, this was probably their first exposure and felt novel. Or even Star Trek, with them casting people of color, a controversy at the time, but now many consider Star Trek ahead of its time. And while neither of these are perfect representation, they are both novel and work to create a platform for more complex representation in the future. So let's just break it down. In the MCU, we have had 21 movies. 21 movies within the universe that some might even call novel itself. Comic book movies have never been here, nor superheroes, so it is fair to say that the MCU itself is novel. Yet, how is it that nearly 20 movies have all been with male leads? Even if you broke it down into a series of films, that's still 10 different heroes. If you met 10 random people, then there would at least be a chance, there would at least be 50% chance of one of them being a woman, right? Like, logically, it just doesn't make any sense. And yes, I understand Gamora, Scarlet Witch, and Black Widow, all of them exist, and I'm not trying to discredit them, but the Marvel movies are a franchise. Tony Stark is a supporting character in Spider-Man, and he gets his own movie, as did Captain America. Yet, with neither Scarlet Witch or Black Widow, none of them are allowed to exist within their own film. They're forced to the background. You know, even Star-Lord is the main character in Guardians of the Galaxy. So honestly, if you can't tell the difference between a woman getting her own film versus consistently being a supporting character, then I don't think you understand story structure. Because it is a unique identity on full display, an identity that the MCU, a novel franchise, has yet to fully tap into. However, this movie isn't perfect, and it's not actually amazing representation, yet there is this pushback on this movie because people are just happy about the novelty of having a woman as the lead hero. You know, whether it be from reviews or social media or YouTube videos, there's a horrible, bigoted, toxic culture that prevents any real discussion to be had about this representation. As a result, people flock and defend this movie because it is novel, yet it is not entirely representation because there's this group of terrible people dumping all over it. Rotten Tomatoes had to close down audience reviews because so many people went just to troll it. And so big companies like Disney win by having this mediocre representation, and people who care feel compelled to fight a bunch of bigots. Which sucks, because the point of art is the inherent idea of searching and grasping with the complex identities every single person faces. And sometimes it means having things that you can relate to, and sometimes it has things that you can't relate to. And so the message becomes even more lost when we do have this new identity on display, and people then now claim that this is a bad thing. So I feel, as just a consumer, a bit beaten down by all of it. And you know, I'm not quite sure what the answer is. Representation is supposed to be about empowering different groups of people by giving them a platform to boost and create their own art, especially in superhero movies, which are all about, you know, individual self-empowerment. But companies like Disney give us these lackluster forms of it, and in the end we end up defending the novelty when, you know, representation should just be the norm. You know, how can we make it to the point where films like Captain Marvel are being seen and aren't faced with this toxic backlash, so we can actually have a conversation about it without associating ourselves with bigotry? Well, that's definitely not up to me to decide. Of course, shaming and calling out bigotry is always good and forever part of the movement forward, and being aware of these issues may not always get us up that next step, but it does let us know where we're at. And of course, to pretend that there aren't people from communities writing about this improper representation would just be wrong. It's just a lot of people with nuanced takes are being harassed or don't have the mainstream traffic, and we shouldn't also harass people from other groups to educate us about their oppression, but instead we should all be actively listening, supporting, and following people of these various groups, not only to make all of our art better, but to then be actively contributing to the better forms of representation of art we all want to see. So please, once again, go check out those formal reviews of Captain Marvel. And let's all try to remember to support those whose stories don't get told. Representation goes beyond just having a cast, or an author, or an artist. It's a culture of cultivating a variety of backgrounds and people while still ensuring no one gets pushed beneath someone else to get higher, and people from above lowering themselves down and bringing others up with them. But that's all I got. Thank you for watching and sharing, and I'll see you next time.